Okay, so let's get started. In terms of agenda for today, a number of different things we want to cover. We want to cover things as simple as, hey, what can I use the Climate FieldView Drive in? Which pieces of equipment are compatible? And how do I physically plug that drive into the CAN port on my machine? We'll also cover things like what software do we need? What is that cab app? How do I set it up with the iPad? How do I get it to sync with the drive itself? How do I put in the equipment, information about the equipment that I'm going to be using at Harvest this year into the software? We'll talk about getting your data into the system if you haven't done that already. How do I get my field boundaries in there? And how do I get my planting data in there or past harvest files? We'll at least touch on that. And then we also will go through a number of little sort of software tips and tricks to help you get the most out of the Climate FieldView Cab app and use it as efficiently as possible during harvest this year. So that's what we want to cover. And first, let's start with the equipment compatibility. So if you're going to harvest this year, depending on what combine model, make, different things you have available on the farm, are you going to be able to use Climate FieldView Drive with that piece of equipment? And it really comes down to four things. It comes down to the yield sensors that exist on that machine, the combine model number, the display, brand, and type that you have in the cab, and the GPS receiver that's on the combine. And so there are obviously a lot of permutations and combinations of these four vectors that exist on farms across the country and Canada and other places. And so what I'm not going to do today is go through an exhaustive list of every combination that will work with Climate FieldView Drive this year. What I am going to suggest is that you can go to our support page and look at compatibility there and see if your machine is compatible. There's a compatibility guide that will allow you to look through the combination of equipment that you have and see if you're compatible. You can also contact our support team, and I'll be putting the phone number to that up at the end of this call, or you can find it on our webpage, but it's 888-924-7475, and you can just call and explain to them, tell them what you have, and they will be able to tell you if you can run Climate FieldView Drive live in the field this year. But what we're trying to do as a company is get to the point where as many combinations of different equipment that exist in the market, we can support them all. Now that obviously takes some time, and we currently support lots of John Deere combinations. We support a lot of case combinations as well, at least at the flagship model level. We are adding or have added now Plus New Holland, Massey Ferguson, Gleaner, and Challenger compatibility as well. So there is a lot of equipment in the market today, especially if it uses the OEM monitor, the OEM GPS unit that is going to be compatible with Climate. And then there's a number of systems where even some of the aftermarket stuff that you've added on will still make it compatible. So I think the best suggestion is go to our support page and search for machine compatibility to download the latest guide or look at it. There's also a compatibility checker online that allows you to kind of go through what you have, and it will recommend whether you're compatible. And you can also call our support team. So a few different ways to make sure before you go into harvest and before you go too far, am I or am I not going to be able to collect data live in the field using the Climate FieldView Drive device this year? Okay, so that's compatibility. The second thing is plugging in Drive. How do I physically make it work? And if you are a Climate FieldView Plus subscriber and you have a drive, you ordered a drive as well, maybe you had one last year, they haven't changed at all. They still look like what you see in this picture here. But it's a little device that plugs directly into the CAN diagnostic port on your combine. It listens to the data that is being transmitted on that port, and it pushes it via Bluetooth to your iPad. So when you're running Drive, you need to have this device plugged into your combine. You need to have an iPad in the cab of the combine to receive the data, and your data will still go through to your monitor. This is not replacing your monitor in any way. You will still have the data in your monitor as you always have. It's just that your data is also going to go to a secondary location, which would be your iPad and the Climate FieldView Cab app. So you're just going to have a couple of different ways in which you can choose to use and view your data when you are using Climate FieldView Drive in the cab of the combine. So how do we plug it in? Well, this is a really simple process, and I've taken a couple of pictures on a case combine here that show where this port exists, because this is step one. Find the CAN diagnostic port so you can plug the device in and be ready to go. And Case makes it fairly easy. On the left-hand side, I've got a picture of an A combine where the port is right on the ignition panel. So right there below the key at the bottom, there's the port. When you first look at it, it may be covered with a cap, and you may have to take that cap off. But once you take that cap off, you'll expose the port. You take the drive device, you push it onto the port, give it a quarter turn to the right, it will lock in place, it will power up, and it'll flash some lights at you, and you will be ready to go from a physical installation standpoint. It literally doesn't take more than 20 seconds to install your drive device once you know where the port is. The second picture on the right is from a Case 7230 combine, and when any model that's 2013 or newer. And this picture doesn't give a lot of context on where that drive is, but really the port is between the two seats. So if I was sitting in the driver's seat of the combine, I would reach back behind me to the left, and the port is on the back wall of the combine between the driver's seat and the buddy seat there. Again, usually covered with a cap. Take the cap off, plug the drive in, give it a quarter turn to the right. It will lock into place, it will power up, and you will be ready to go from a physical installation standpoint. Deere makes it a little bit harder in some cases. So a common location for a lot of Deere combines, the S-Series and some of the others, is inside the cup holder, inside the cab. So you might spend a lot of time looking for your CAN port if you're in a Deere combine and not find it because it's not very intuitive. But what you do is you lift out the cup holder, the port is underneath there, again covered with a cap usually, so take the cap off, plug the drive in. You can then put the cup holder back in. You're not restricted from drinking any beverages while you're combining just because you're running drive. So it'll all work fine. But just wanted to show this one as an example of how the CAN port can be a bit tricky to find sometimes. So what I would recommend is take the time to get out to your combine here now before you start harvest, find the port, plug the drive in, and then leave it there. Once you plug it in, you don't need to take it out of the combine. Just find the location, plug it in so you're ready to go when you want to harvest. But take the time to do that now. And if you can't find the CAN port in your combine, just call your tech service guy for whatever brand it is that you're running. He will know where that CAN port is, because anytime something is wrong with your combine, that's where he plugs in to read the machine diagnostics and understand what's going on. So he'll know where that port is and should be able to tell you pretty quickly where to find it. Okay, so that said, there are a couple of lights that could flash on the front, that will flash on the front of the drive device. And it's not that important to know about these, but I just want to touch on it so that you understand what those mean if you do see some lights. Anytime you see a green or a blue light, don't worry about that. Those are good lights that mean, hey, your drive is either updating the firmware and it's going to be ready to go in 30 seconds if it's green, or if it's blue, it means you're connected and you're ready to receive data and pass data through to your iPad. So those are both good lights that are normal lights to see on the drive. The third light, a red light, if you ever do see a red light on your drive, you're probably going to see a number of different problems in the software as well. But a red light will mean that something has gone wrong with your drive device that you probably won't be able to fix. And so what we'd recommend is if you do see a red light, please call our support team. They'll run some diagnostics, help you figure out what's going on, and get you back on track with the equipment. Okay. I mentioned you do need an iPad in the cab, and this is required to collect data while you're harvesting. Basically, the iPad is the controller that tells the drive, where do I put the data? Which field am I in right now? If you didn't have an iPad in the cab while you were combining, all of your data would go into one big file. You'd have all your harvest data in one big file, and you wouldn't ever be able to separate it out and figure out by field what yields were, etc. So you do need an iPad in the cab. It has to be an iPad 4 or later. And how do you know if you have an iPad 4 or later? Just look at the charging cable on your iPad. If it's one of those skinny lightning chargers, like seen in the picture on the right-hand side of the page here, you're good to go. It is an iPad 4 or later, so you have met the minimum requirements to collect data using the Climate FieldView Drive. if it is a fat old, the fat 32-pin plug, the old one seen on the left-hand side of that picture, Apple has stopped supporting those iPads, and they are not allowed to, they don't allow them to upgrade to iOS 10 or iOS 11, which is coming, and so you just won't be able to run our software. It's too old of an iPad, and Apple has stopped supporting those, so you won't be able to do that unless you have the skinny charger. Now, skinny charger exists on a lot of different iPads. You might have that skinny charger on an old iPad mini that has only 16 gigs of space. The skinny charger, the iPad 4 later, is the minimum requirement, but if you're running a 16 gig iPad, you are going to very, very quickly run out of space on that iPad as you harvest, because you probably also have a lot of other things on that iPad. Technically, yes, the system would work on an iPad mini for at least a little while until you ran out of space, but we recommend bigger is better, certainly. And I'm going to talk a little bit about data storage capacity, how you can tell how much space you have left on your iPad, how you can free up more space, and just go through some of those things here when I get into the app in a few minutes. One other point on iPads, it's not required that the iPad have a data plan, but it is recommended. If you don't have a data plan on your iPad, there's at least a couple of pieces of functionality that won't work. Number one, you won't be able to run remote view. So remote view is a feature I'll show you we'll talk about here when we get in the software that allows anyone who you let in to watch you combine in the field from wherever they are. So it's pretty helpful from an operational perspective if maybe you're the farm manager but you're not the one running the combine. Throughout the course of the day, you can use remote view to, instead of calling the guy running the combine, you can just look directly and see where he is, how much of the field he has done. You can see live what kind of yields are coming out of the field anytime you want, because you have the ability to essentially dial into that combine and get a live view of everything that he's seeing on the monitor and in the Climate FieldView cab app. Another thing that wouldn't work if you didn't have a data plan is you wouldn't be able to have swath control on multiple combines in the same field. So there is some functionality that you'll lose if you don't have a data plan, but a data plan is not required. You can harvest with a Wi-Fi only iPad. It will work fine. You just won't have access to those two pieces of functionality, and you would need to make sure you brought that iPad back to the house or back to the shop every couple of days to let it offload data, just so you don't lose all your harvest data in case something was to go catastrophically wrong with your iPad, like it falls out of the combine and you run it over. You'd want to make sure you bring it back and sync it every now and then. Okay, there are a number of enhancements that have come. I know people on the phone, we have some of you that have used the Climate FieldView cab app for a number of years, and some of you are new to the system altogether. For those of you that have used it for a number of years, the changes worth noting that we're going to go over today while we review the software are: we have simplified the combine head options. We've made post-harvest yield adjustment very simple to do in the cab app. We've allowed the direct sending of field files from one Climate FieldView account to another. So this is a really helpful tool that we've added here for people that are doing custom combining, custom planting, custom spraying for other farmers. We've improved some of the harvest height interactions. We've added default GPS measurements for common combines. We have compatibility now for deer and raven anhydrous applicators. If you are doing anhydrous applications this fall, you'll be supported there. There's additional remote view functionality that really allows anyone that you want to remote view your system, not just people who are on the same account. And there's some functionality here about adding activities, adding planting activities that's coming soon as well. That probably won't be relevant until the spring, or for those of you who are planting winter wheat here this fall, may be helpful as well. So we will cover all that here in the software in just a minute, but wanted to get an overview of some of those new things for people that have been using the system for a few years. So what I want to talk about now is getting set up with the cab app. And again, if you have your iPad available, feel free to grab it and follow along. I'm going to see if I can get my iPad to display on the screen here. And again, questions about anything, please go ahead and type those in, and I'll make sure I address those by the end of the call today. But I think everyone can see my iPad now. So I'm going to start demoing how you get ready to go with Climate FieldView. So first, let me just go back to my main screen on my iPad. And the piece of software that you need to collect data live in the field is the Climate FieldView CAB app. It's the one that's on the bottom right of my iPad here. It's a white background with a gray F and the word CAB. That's the one that you're going to need to find on the App Store and install to be able to collect data live in the field this year using Climate FieldView Drive. So just go to the App Store, search for Climate FieldView. There will be two apps that you find. One has a black background with an orange F. One is this white background with a gray F. Download and install them both, but the one you're going to need for harvest is the CAB app. So that's the most important one for the harvest activities that you have available. Now, once you have it installed, what you're going to do is you're going to, and I highly recommend you do this before, not 10 minutes before you want to start harvest, but do this at least, as far ahead of time as possible, just to make sure that you get everything functioning correctly and you have time to call support in case you're running into any problems or questions. But go out to your combine, install the drive as we showed. So find that CAN port, plug it in, give it that quarter turn to the right, power it up, make sure it's working. And then you're going to take your iPad while you are sitting in the cab and you're going to pair it with that drive. Because as I mentioned, the drive talks to your iPad via Bluetooth. So it's just like your phone and your truck, where when you hop in your truck, the first time you got that new truck or you got a new phone and you got in there and you wanted to enable the Bluetooth on your phone, you had to pair the two devices. You had to go through the process of saying, okay, let's make sure these two devices know each other and that they can talk to each other. But once you did that, you never had to do it again. Every time you jumped in the truck, your phone and your truck knew each other, they would connect, and you would be ready to go to make phone calls. This works the same way. The first time that you install Drive, you have to pair it with your iPad so that they know each other. But once they know each other, every time you bring that iPad into the cab of the combine or the planter, wherever the drive is powered in, they're going to know each other, they're going to sync, and they're going to start talking to each other immediately. So how do we pair the two devices? Well, we go over to settings, and the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure our Bluetooth is on, that we are in fact able to receive a Bluetooth signal through the iPad. So I go to Bluetooth here on the left-hand side of the page. Right on the left-hand side, there's airplane mode, there's Wi-Fi, and there's Bluetooth. I click the Bluetooth, and I'm going to go ahead and click Bluetooth on. It's going to show me a list of devices that I've already connected to in the past, and right now it tells me, hey, none of those devices are connected. None of them are powered up and in range, so I'm not seeing any of those devices. But now what I would do is I would take my drive, and I have kind of a fake power source here that's going to allow me to pretend that I'm in a combine right now. So I'm going to take my drive here right at my hotel desk here and plug it in into this power source and give it a quarter turn to the right. It flashes some green lights at me, it flashes some blue lights at me, and here you're going to see in a second that my drive Hamlin there in my list has now flipped over to connected. So I am now connected, ready to start collecting data. And it happened that way because I have already paired my drive and my iPad before, so they know each other. So anytime they're in range and both of them have power, they sync and they get in a point where they are ready to start transmitting data. Now, if you're plugging your drive in for the first time, they're not going to know each other. And so when you plug it in and power it up, it's going to show up in the other devices section here on the bottom of the page. That you can see mine is kind of spinning right now, looking for other devices. So yours will show up in other devices. You will need to click on it in the other devices. Your iPad will ask you, do you want to pair to this device? You'll say yes, and then you'll be ready to go in terms of being connected between that drive and that iPad. So that's what the process looks like to get yourself connected, and that should take care of almost all situations getting ready to go. And then from that point forward, anytime you plug that drive in and you have the iPad in range, they're going to know each other and start being ready to transmit data. So you may finish harvest, and then next spring you put the drive in the planter to start collecting planting data, and it doesn't matter that you switched machines. They're still going to know each other. As soon as you plug that drive in and you bring the iPad into the cab of the planter, they'll connect and be ready to go for data collection, because it's the drive and the iPad that are connecting, not the planter or the combine. It's the drive that has the Bluetooth source. Okay, so that said, let me just go back here then. So now I'm connected. I'm going to launch the FieldView CAB app, and what you're going to see is that in the lower right-hand corner, I've got a green light that says Drive with a green light on it. That is the thing you're looking for every time you get in the cab before you start harvesting. If you see that green light when you launch the Climate FieldView cab app, you are in good shape, you're ready to go, and your data will be collected correctly. If you don't see that green light in the lower right-hand corner, well, the first thing I would do is I would go back to the settings and say, hey, is my Bluetooth on? And yes, my Bluetooth is on. And then I'd go to my devices and see if it said Drive Hamlin is connected, and in this case it is. So I'd say, okay, well, that all looks pretty good. The last place that I might check just to make sure that things are going okay is inside of settings in the cab app. There's an option on the left-hand side that says devices with a picture of an iPad and a picture of a Drive device. And if I click on that, it's going to show me my Drive. And maybe you'll come in, there'll be some situations here where the green check mark might not be next to your Drive and you have to click it here to fully connect it. You could also click Pair New Drive here as a way to connect a new drive rather than doing it through the accessory or the Bluetooth page. So there's a few different ways to get to the same endpoint, but these are all the places where you can find information about, is your drive working? And then, you know, if you're on this home page, you've checked all those things and you're on this home page and that green light in the lower right-hand corner is still not showing, 98% of problems can be solved by unplugging the drive for 5 seconds and replugging it back into your combine or your planter. Sometimes some little glitch goes on, and a vast majority of the time you can solve that problem by unplugging, replugging it in, letting it rebroadcast the Bluetooth signal, and then you'll be able to connect the two. If for some reason you still can't connect, that's why we have the support team available. So please call our support team, 888-924-7475. You can always find their phone number by clicking on the Help button in the Climate FieldView cab app. The phone number is listed right there. You will get a live person in our St. Louis office. They will walk you through the steps, make sure that they can figure out what's going on, get you connected and ready to go. Okay, so that's about it on getting connected. The next thing I want to go through, and again, questions about anything, please go ahead and type those in. But next thing I want to go through is setting up equipment. So once you're connected and your iPad and your Drive know each other, you have to tell the software what piece of equipment you're going to be harvesting with this year, what piece of compatible equipment you're going to be harvesting with this year. So what you do is you click on equipment, and again, please follow along with me. If you have your iPad in front of you and you need to set up equipment, well, let's do it right now based on what you're going to be harvesting with this year. So you click on equipment, and I've already got a lot of equipment in my account because I've built some of these pieces before in other demonstrations, etc. But if you don't have anything on this page, that is fine. Just click the Add New Equipment button at the bottom right now, and it will say, okay, you want to put a new piece of equipment into your system. And it's going to ask you what kind of equipment it is: tractor, planter, an air seeder, a sprayer, a combine, a cart, an anhydrous applicator. We're obviously looking to add a combine right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click combine as my option, and I'll click next. Now it's going to ask me what my combine make is. And so your list may look slightly different than this. I think I'm running a beta version of the software that's a little bit advanced versus what's in the market today. So you may just see Deere and Case in New Holland. I've got class options on here as well. But pick the model, combine make that you have. And so I'm going to say, in this case, hey, it's a John Deere combine. I hit next. Is it a 60 or a 70 or an S series? I'm going to say it's an S series. I'm going to say it's an S680. Hit next. Give it a name. This is my my new S680, so that I'll recognize this combine when I see it in a list if I've got multiple combines running on my farm. And then I hit next, and I am pretty much done. That is how you set up a combine. And if you have multiple combines, do it multiple times, and you'll add all the pieces of equipment that you have there on the farm. So pretty simple stuff. Now there's a couple last steps. So I'm going to click the next button here, and it's going to take me to a screen that allows me to go through a bit more combine setup that's required. And the first one is your GPS offsets. So as we're measuring yield data in the field, yield data, moisture data, all this stuff, we need to place it properly in the field. And in order to do so, we need to know where the GPS unit is on the combine relative to the cutting edge of the combine head. So there's some measurements that need to be taken. And we have, one of the new things we've done here at the Harvest this year is we know what these measurements are on a standard combine setup. So we pre-populated them for most of these combines so that You don't have to measure them, but it's still best while you're going out and setting up, take a tape measure, take some of these measurements, make sure it looks like we're in the right ballpark for your machine and model number. But basically the ones you want here on the combine are, there's a front offset, which is how far from the center of the front axle to the GPS location on the hood of the combine. What's that distance measurement in horizontal inches? Is A. Then there's B, is the GPS unit offset left, center, right, and usually they're centered on the combine hood there. And then there's the height. What's the height of the GPS unit from the ground to where it's mounted? So those are 3 measurements that you'll want to take or verify, and once you have those verified, you can move on. So take a tape measure out when you are going out to do your combine setup. The next thing is heads. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we can switch to heads. And for those of you that have used this software system before, you're used to heads, and you've probably set up corn heads and bean heads and wheat heads and et cetera in the past. We've made one significant change to heads this year, where we now have either row crop heads or platform heads, rather than crop-specific heads. So now we don't care if it's a bean head or whether you're harvesting beans or wheat, it's still just a platform head. And what we've done is we've converted all your existing heads to be either row type heads or platform type heads. So all those conversions should have been done. It's going to make life a little bit easier in the field to not have to say, oh, I not have to build both a bean and a wheat head when technically they're really the same. So how do we build heads if we're starting from scratch, though? Again, I have a number of heads in here, but if you don't have any, you'll want to build the heads that you have available for your combine. And so you just click the Add New Head button. It's going to bring up a default head, and you're going to tell it a couple things. You're going to say, hey, what's my head type? Is it a platform head type or a row type head? So I'm going to say I'm building my corn head now, so I'm going to say it's a row type head. How many rows or sections do I have? Well, it's a 12-row head. You change that as necessary. This current height thing, you do need to put in a max harvesting height, and this is the percentage at which when you raise the head above that percentage, you don't want to map yield data anymore, because that's a head height that you use for turning around the end rows or driving down the road. It's a head height that's a non-harvesting height, and this is an important number to put in order to make sure that you are only collecting data when harvesting and not double mapping parts of the field that you've already covered. So it's easiest to set this when you are in the combine and the head is attached, because what you can do is you can just raise the head to the non-harvesting height and then click on this screen, click the Use Current Height button, and it'll push that height over into the max harvesting height. I'm not connected to a combine right now, so I can't raise and lower the head, but if I did, when I raised the head to that non-harvesting height, it would show me what my current height is over there. It would say, yeah, you're at 58%, and then I just click Use Current Height, and it'll move it over it'll set that as the max harvesting height. I wouldn't want to use 100% in a real situation, so I'm just going to change this and say 60% is my max harvesting height. But it's easiest to set this when you are in the combine. I will send out a little video on how to do this to everyone when we wrap up the webinar today. Then there's some other measurements here about the forward distance, the row spacing, and the head offset. So what is the distance from the axle to the cutting edge of the combine head? This one you should get your tape measure out and measure, just depending on what head you have. Those measurements may be different. What is your row spacing? Are you on 30-inch rows? Are you on 22-inch rows? What's your spacing on your rows? And once you've done all this and you click Done, well, first you can change the name of the head if you want. You can say, this is my my new corn head. Just give it something that will make you recognize it when you see it in a list. Hit Done here, and hit Done, and I'm set. I've now built a corn head that I'll be able to select when I pull into the field to harvest. Very similar for a soybean head. I'll just show it quickly. So I add a new head. I say, no, now it's not a row crop, it's a platform head. Leave swath sections to 32. That's the most we can do, and I think it gives the greatest granularity of data. Basically, this says, on my head, you could set it to 2, and then it would say, well, I have a right and a left section of my head, and anytime I'm harvesting crop that's touching the right side of my head, I'm going to spread that yield across the entire right side of my head. If I set my swath sections to 32, it's going to have a lot more granularity or specificity of data, because if I'm harvesting a point row and just a portion of the head is engaged, we will be able to place that data appropriately in the field on the yield map rather than spreading it across a big chunk of your head. It'll put it where it came from. But everything else is the same. Set a max harvesting height, measure your forward distance, put in your head width in inches, and hit done, and you'll be ready to go with a new platform head. There's a couple settings that you don't need to worry about too much. The shared swath is coming, and so that one's not even enabled yet, but it's going to come soon here. The flow sensor lag here is the one that you may need to look at, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. This is the one that you may need to come back to. Once you start harvesting, if you see certain patterns showing up on your yield maps, you may need to come here and adjust the flow sensor lag. But that flow sensor lag is the time it takes for corn or beans or wheat or whatever you're harvesting to be cut and to finally reach the mass flow sensor and get measured. And in most combines, it's about 14 seconds, but this can vary a bit from combine to combine. So that's a value that you might need to come back in and edit at some point. Okay, so I'm going to hit done, and I am done setting up my equipment. That said, what I want to do now is show you a demonstration of what this is going to look like in the field. And I know some of you who have used the system before, you're pretty familiar with this, though there have been some changes this year. So I'm going to go over to show a demonstration of what are you going to see when you are harvesting in the field. So let me run this demo and talk through a couple of things. So when you're harvesting in the field, this is one of the, you're going to have some options as to what you see on the screen, but this is one thing you might see, and I've just paused the demo for the moment. But here I am, I can see my combine icon on the screen, I can see the yield data being mapped in real time as I pass through the field. I can see a bunch of facts on the left-hand side of the screen in terms of what my instantaneous yield is that I'm harvesting, what my field level average yield is, what my moisture is, how many acres I've harvested, how many pounds I've harvested. I can see that little green light in the lower left-hand corner telling me that I am connected and I am collecting data live, and well, I can actually see that in the screen as well. And then what's new this year is some of the stuff at the bottom middle of the page, where it shows us our head height, it shows us the crop that we're harvesting there based on the planting data that we have available. We know that, hey, in this particular part of the field, we planted DeKalb 4310, and so that's what we're harvesting right now. There's the ability to add loads, and then there's this head section at the bottom. If you're ever harvesting, you have the green light in the lower right-hand corner, and you're not painting a map. So you're out there harvesting, you're saying, what's going on? I'm not getting a harvest map showing. The biggest problem we had with last year was people were in this in a head-lifted situation where they were above the max harvesting height, but they hadn't set a max harvesting height yet. So setting max harvesting height is important, and if you haven't done it right while you're harvesting, all those lights on the bottom of the page, the 8 rows, are going to all turn red, and it's going to just show you, hey, you're in a non-harvesting position. And that will kind of be your clues as to what's wrong. You can go in there and set your max harvesting height correctly to get your harvest data to show up. So we tried to bring that to the front of the page a little more efficiently this year so that it's a little more obvious if you're basically not collecting data because of a max harvesting height issue. But I'm going to run this demo, and so you're going to see what happens here. So the harvest goes along, the map paints as you go. You can choose what data layer to see in that drop down in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Do I want to look at yield, or do I want to look at crop moisture? What do I want to see on the screen? So you have a couple of choices there. You can also, as you're harvesting, you can look at some, I think it's going to show reports next, or no, it's going to go back to the yield map here. So again, which variable you want to see is up to you. It's going to allow you to split the screen, and you can look at 2 variables at the same time. So I could say, hey, let me look at my yield map on the right-hand side of the screen, but let me look at my hybrid, my planting map on the left-hand side of the screen to give me some context as I'm harvesting about, what am I in right now? Which variety am I going to be moving into next? You have the ability to split the screen and look at any 2 variables that you have available on either side of the screen there, to kind of help you with some of that early data analysis about what might be going on, what practices might or might not have worked better this year by splitting the screen as we see here. One other thing I want to mention here, as we're harvesting, you see here that on the harvest map, the combine's going, and there's a big gap between it and where the yield data is showing up. If you're new to the system, that is the way the system does and should work, because this is that flow sensor lag thing where when we're in the field and we're cutting corn, As it gets cut, it takes it 14 seconds before the corn that we're cutting right now will reach the mass flow sensor in the elevator and get measured, so we can put a value on the map here. So that gap between the combine and where the yield data is showing up is correct. You should see that because we want to put the yield data in the right place. We want to put it on the field where the corn was cut, and it does take those 14 seconds for it to move through the combine. So that is okay. What you'd want to do is you just want to look at, as you come in and out of the headlands every time, are you getting a gap? Are you seeing a data problem there? If you are, that would be the sign that you might need to change your flow sensor lag, either increase or decrease it by half a second or a second or something to be correct for the amount of time it takes for corn, beans, wheat, whatever, to flow through your combine. So I'll let this demo run again. Some other things that you can do is you can look at reporting live while you're in the field. Hey, what's the yield of the two hybrids, the instantaneous yield of the two hybrids I planted here? And then, of course, when you finish the field, you would get a full field report that tells you what each hybrid yielded, but you can look at that as you go. You can go back to a single variable view, as you see here. So you have some options as to what you see on the screen. The other thing to notice here is I lifted the head on my combine as I came into the headlands here, and all those rows on the bottom of the screen turned red. So I'm in a head lifted position now. All my rows turned red, telling me that I am not mapping or collecting data anymore, because I don't want to double count those acres there in the headlands. And then when I bring my head back down to a harvesting position, I'll start collecting data again. So that's about it for that demo, I think. Not a whole lot more. There's some loads things. You can choose different loads, but I'm not going to go into that here on this particular call today. Okay, so that said, let's go back to the system and cover our last couple things. So let me see what I've covered already. Let's talk about heads. Let's talk about remote view. How does remote view work? So if you are wanting to watch someone else combine and see a live view of what's going on in there, where are they in the field, how much of the field have they harvested, what do the yields look like so far, what you do is you go over to equipment, and in the upper right hand corner of the page next to the house, there's a little picture of a farmer with a magnifying glass. And if I click on that, it's going to show me, well, I don't have, none of my equipment that is other equipment is powered on, but if a piece of equipment is powered on and it has a cell signal available in the field, it would show up in my equipment list. And it would say, hey, which combine do you want to look at? And I could just click on it. A note would go to that operator it would pop up on his iPad screen saying, hey, Jeff Hamlin wants to look in on your yield or on your remote view. Do you want to let him? And then combine has the option to say yes or no. And this works not only in your operation, so maybe it's me trying to look at my brother-in-law running the combine, but maybe I am a dealer and I've got 10 farmer clients that are running Climate FieldView Drive in the field this harvest, and I'm trying to help them. I'm going to be putting in some fall fertility after they get the crop out of the field, and so I want to know where they are, how far along they've gotten. I can type in the FieldView username, basically the email address that they use to log into FieldView, search for them here, pull up their combine information, and click on it and look at it as well if they choose to let me when I make that request. So you can look at not only your own equipment, but you can look at other people's equipment if they choose to let you and see where they are and see how harvest is going. And that should be a really helpful tool for a lot of, I know the dealers and custom applicators and people out there who it may help to kind of keep track of where someone is in the field and how things are going without having to get on the phone constantly and bug them on the phone. One note about that. The use of remote view, it is very data intensive. It takes a lot of data to live stream what's going on in the field back to another iPad. So I would not recommend leaving the remote view open all day long, but it's a good thing to use. You can check in, see where they are, watch for a few minutes, and then I would disconnect and shut it down just so you don't go through a whole bunch of data on someone's data plan. Okay. What else? Let's talk about notifications. So I'm going to go back to my FieldView Cab app, and there's a section here called Settings. Inside the Settings, there's something called Notifications on the bottom of the page. And if you haven't used these before, they're pretty cool and they can be pretty helpful. One of the notifications I can set up is at the top of the page here. I can ask for an email report, either daily or on field change, that will tell me what has happened, as things happen in the field if I do it on field change, or daily it'll give me a summary of all the different fields that were planted or combined that day. So the way I have it set up in this account is I put my email address, I say field change, and then every time that combine moves from one field to another, I'm getting an email saying, hey, the combine 1 has moved to the north field. And that can just kind of help you in a passive way keep track of how harvest progress is going and when someone is moving from one location to another. So that's a pretty helpful one to set up if you are trying to keep track of what's going on in the field, you have multiple combines around, use that as you see fit. The second one is text alerts. So you can set up your system to send you text alerts for specific things that are being measured in the field as you go. And so since we're talking about harvest here, if I was to go in here and say I want to add a new alert setting, I could say, let me add a harvest setting, let's hit next, and tell me anytime that I've got corn moisture greater than, 29% coming out of the field, and I hit done. I now have an alert where it's going to send me a text anytime, and I think the threshold is 5 acres. Anytime that the combine operator is out there and he takes more than 5 acres of corn that's greater than 29% moisture. And this can obviously help you with a lot of sort of logistics and planning. And hey, I gotta get ready to send a truck to the elevator so I can get this corn, or tell them that I've got some wet corn coming in. Whatever the case might be, you can set these alerts to at the harvest side. The different alerts you have available are corn moisture greater than, corn moisture less than, soybean moisture greater than, soybean moisture less than, and wheat moisture greater than as well. At the planting side, you can set things like, hey, tell me anytime the planter goes over 6 miles an hour, because I told that guy to stay below 6 miles an hour, and if he goes faster, I want to know it, so I can call him and ask him why he's driving so fast and get him to slow down so he get a good planting set. So a lot of different options you have here on the text alerts to just, keep track of what's going on in the field passively and be alerted when maybe something is happening that you need to be aware of for whatever reason may be. Okay, so those are that's how you set notifications. Let me go through data now, and I'm just going through a couple of these sort of tips and tricks on how to use the software more efficiently. Just a few of these to go through, and then we'll wrap up here for the day. Data is a place where you can see all the data that currently exists on your system. And importantly, on this page at the bottom, there's something that shows you how much space is available on your iPad. And I've got a fairly empty iPad here, and it's a big iPad Pro, and so I've got 96.85 gigabits left. I could harvest data for a lot of days, or harvest yields for a lot of days and not run out of data. But if you come to the screen, you're showing 1 gig available, 2 gigs available. That is something you would want to get fixed before you start harvesting. Because if you are harvesting and you fill up your iPad, the CAB app's going to shut down on you, and it is not going to allow you to collect any more information until you free up space. So it's not a situation you want to run into at harvest. So see how much space you have available before you start harvest, and if you're out of space, either go in and delete apps that are using up a lot of space that you're not using, go in and delete pictures and videos and things that your daughter may have put on the iPad. I know my daughter puts plenty of things on that take up space that I don't need, and so I can delete those off. Or at the top of this page, you can see all the farm data that you have on your iPad, and you can see that I have data from 2015, 16, and 17 here. Now, I don't need to store data locally on my iPad. It all should be able to be saved to the cloud and then pulled down on demand whenever I need it. So I'm going to show you how to delete data off of here, but before you delete data off your iPad, I would first go to the home screen and I would click the Cloud Sync button in the lower left-hand corner. When I click Cloud Sync, it will start spinning and it'll say, okay, is there any data on this iPad that doesn't exist in the cloud yet that I need to duplicate or save? And so it'll go through and do this, and once it finishes its cloud sync, then you're safe to delete anything off the iPad that you don't need in real time. So it's going through that process, but I'm going to go back over to settings and data, and I'm going to say, you know what, this 2015 data, maybe I need to look at it again, but if I do, I can always come back in here and build the map and look at it there. Or I can always look at my maps live in the Climate FieldView app, not the CAB app. That one is one where we can always just pull down data as we need it on demand versus building maps on the iPad. So I can come in here and say, you know what, I need to free up space. Let's get rid of this 2015 data. Let's clear that South Field data, hit clear map. It's going to delete it, and I've just freed up space on my iPad. So this is another option for you. Just get rid of some of the old data that exists from previous years that's on your iPad once you have ensured that you've done a cloud sync and you've saved it all to your cloud storage. Okay, two more things I want to say. Let's talk about sending data. So let's say I do go in here, and this is really for people that do custom operations. So I'm here, I'm on 2017. I've custom harvested a field for someone, and that person has a Climate FieldView account as well, and they want the harvest map, understandably. So if I'm someone doing some custom harvesting, I harvest it, it's in my account, I've got the map here. I can just click the Share Field Data button, and I can enter the email address that they use to log into Climate. It has to be the same email address that they log into Climate with in order for it to find that account and push the data to the right place. And I can say, you know what, let's send the Jefferson Center data field, and I need an email address. Once I have the email address in, I click this Send to Account button, and it will push the data directly into their Climate account. Now, it's going to push it into the data inbox part of their Climate account, so it's not going to just show up automatically in their Climate mobile app. It's going to sit in their data inbox and wait for them to import it. And this just prevents, someone from accidentally clogging someone else's account with a bunch of data that's not really theirs. You can choose to send data to someone, but then they have to approve that they really want that data to come into their account. So what they do is they go to climate.com on a web browser, they go to data inbox, they see the field files sitting there that you tried to send them, they review them and they say, hey, yeah, is this really my data? Is this something that I want to have in my account? Or is this some of this, maybe he pushed the wrong field and I don't need it. But they will then approve and pull the data in, and they'll be able to immediately start viewing those harvest maps, planting maps, whatever it is you've chosen to share with them in their Climate account. So this is a really helpful feature for people that are doing custom work for someone else that is also on the Climate FieldView system. Okay, and then the last thing I have on my list that I want to show you is post-harvest true-up. So let's do this. Let me go back, and let's say I'm in the fields section, I'm in the map section here, and I'm looking at, let me pull up a field that has some data. I think this Elkhorn Creek field has some data. Doing planting. I don't want to do planting. Let me disconnect my drive. I've got a planter demo here that it makes it think that I'm planting. So let me go to east. Okay. Elkhorn. Elkhorn Creek. Okay. So here's a field. Here's some yield data. If I harvest this field and I get this yield map, and then I have my scale tickets, or I have the actual weight of corn that came out of this field, the wet pounds of weight that were harvested, I can use that data to true up this harvest map and my harvest data that exists in Climate, because what we're reading is just the numbers that came off the combine. And if combines weren't calibrated correctly, obviously those numbers can be wrong, but if we have the true numbers, actual wet weight that came out of the field, we make it very easy to adjust your do a post-harvest yield adjustment in the system. So what we do is we click on this, there's a button next to the house, to the left of the house on the right-hand side of the screen. If I click that one, there's this harvest summary option. And inside of harvest summary, it's going to tell me, hey, and I've already adjusted this field. So it says, here's my harvested acre, here's my wet weight, here's my moisture, whatever. If I click on this tap to adjust field yield, it's going to allow me to adjust either the harvested acres, the wet weight, or the moisture that came out of this field to whatever I know it truly to be, and to fix the numbers basically that came out of my combine. And in this case, you can see I've already done it. It'll always show you what the original measured values were at the top of the screen. So originally it showed 1.928 million bushels. I adjusted it to 1.7 million bushels, which was my scale ticket numbers that I had for this field. And then it adjusted the bushels information appropriately. So I can always go back to what the original number was. I can say, oh, you know what, I made a mistake there. Let's go back to what the combine numbers originally said. or come here and say, you know, hey, it's 1.8 million is the right number, and you're going to see that my yield will change as well. Instead of 238 bushel yield, I hit done, and now it's going to adjust it appropriately to say that, okay, the yield in this field was 252 bushels. So very, very easy to save your, or to change your harvest summary, adjust your harvest summary post-harvest to match the actual measured numbers that you have coming from scale tickets or your own measurements. And that adjusts the whole map accordingly. Okay, I think that is most of what I wanted to cover in terms of product demo. Again, any questions, go ahead and send those in. I'm going to just flip back to the presentation. I think there might be a few more slides actually. One of the other important things you need to do to get ready for harvest is import your field boundaries and your planting data. If you're new to the system here for harvest this year and you don't have your field boundaries in, or you don't have your planting data in the system, you'll want to get that in, because as soon as you harvest, you're going to start getting these really fantastic reports that are going to tell you what your yield by hybrid is, what your yield by all kinds of different variables are if you put the planting data in from what you did this spring. You can also import old historical, get that data off your shelf and out of your computer and all places, so that you carry it with you everywhere you go, on your phone, on your iPad, and you can reference it. So export your old planting data, your old harvest data from 2016, 2012, 2009. It doesn't matter what year it is. If you have it in an electronic form that we can import, it'll be good to get that into the system. So now you have all your data in one place and you can carry it around with you very easily on your iPad or your phone. Whether Android or iPhone, they both work. You'll be able to see that data. And if you have questions about how to import data, call our support team, or I do data import webinars at least usually certainly once every 2 weeks, if not once every week here, and I'll be doing those all the way, through the winter. So that's about it. So in terms of what's next, install the drive in your combine. Get out to your combine physically and plug it in. Make sure that it powers on. And while you go, take your iPad with you. Make sure that they pair, they get to know each other, and that green light will turn on the cab app screen, so that you can see that, hey, I'm ready to go. And when it is my time to harvest, I can just take my iPad, jump in the cab, and I'll be set. So take your iPad with you, take the drive with you, plug it in, and also take a measuring tape with you just to verify some of those measurements on your equipment and make sure that everything looks right. Import those field boundaries and planting data. That's really important to make sure that you get the most out of this system. And if you have problems with anything, call our climate support team. Additionally, I have been at Climate for a really long time, and so I have the very simple email address of jeff@climate.com. I do travel quite a bit, so I'm not nearly as easy to reach as the live people that sit there waiting to take calls in the St. Louis office. But if there's anything I can do to help you out, certainly feel free to reach out to me as well. That said, I think we're set, so I'm going to go ahead and see what questions have come in, and we'll get those answered. Okay.